Well, hello. Welcome to part B. So, today, there's going to be math. There's going to be two different videos. This is the first video, and I do hope that these are helpful. This is what we worked on in yesterday's video, and if you didn't have a chance to see it, if all of this makes sense to you, then I wouldn't worry about it. But basically, this is what I had worked on. And so today, what we want to first do, this is the most important thing, is we want to track our investments. And so if we look at, I'm going to focus on my, these are my tickers. Obviously, for a commodity, I just name it out, such as sugar. And then what I'm focused on today is what did I spend? Not what was the price per share, not how many shares, but what was the value of my investment. For example, I put $1,000 into sugar. After buying 50 shares of Apple, my total was $1,855. And it's these that I want to focus on today. This one and this one. And so what you want right now is to have downloaded and printed up is this sheet, the worksheet for tracking. And again, make sure to put your name on it. So I'm going to put my little name here. And then I'm going to put in those two tickers. So I've got my sugar. And we saw that my initial investment was $1,000 on sugar. So I'm going to put that down. And then also I have my Apple. And I had $1,855 in that. Now your numbers are going to be different, and that's just fine. So what we want to focus on is this idea of the percent of increase or decrease. So this is where you need, you don't necessarily have to have this printed up, but what I'm going to be using is this sheet that is available to you. And so here it names the original price or price per share, and then what it went up to in regards to commodities and in regards to stocks. So we're going to deal with the commodities first. If you notice, I've also included in the far right column, what was the percent of increase or decrease? If it's an increase, which is most of these are, it's going to have green. If it's a decrease, as you can see it in Nexstar above and in LendingTree, that's going to be in red. But if I focus here and I know, okay, so I bought sugar, and again, what it was when I bought it was 15 cents per share, if you will. And then now it's at 24 cents. So that's pretty good. But what I really need to focus on here is just this, that it had a 60% increase. So then what I do is I go back here and I'm going to put in my 60% increase, right? Let's find out how Apple did. So Apple's a little bit more above on the page there. So Apple's the very top stock. Again, here's my Apple. Bought it at $37.10. It's at $49.44. You don't really have to worry about doing any math with those numbers because right here in this column, it names the percent of change. And in this case, it's 33%. So what I then do is I'm going to fill that out on my chart, 33%. And then I have to actually do this math. So with the sugar, how much is my investment now if I put in $1,000 and it increased 60%? So again, this should be kind of a no-brainer for you, but I'm going to show how that could work. This can actually work out in two different ways. There's the two-part shopping where I would take that $1,000, my original investment. I know that 60% is equal to 0.6, and I'd multiply this by 0.6 and end up, if I do it all properly, at $600. Now, because it's two-part shopping, I then have to take that $600 and add it to my 1,000, and I end up with $1,600. And so my sugar that I bought just a year ago when I was a toddler with a middle school brain has now increased significantly. So my current value now is, as we said, 1,600. Obviously, I'd have to do this for everything. I'm just going to model these two today, right? But I know that my current value now is $1,600, right? Then I would do the same with my Apple, which rose 33%. So here's where I'll show you the one-stop shopping. So another way you could do it is, well, we know that 33% will be 0.33, and we can always round to the nearest percent. Don't worry about anything other than that. I am going to take my 1855, which is what my original investment in Apple was, and instead of multiplying it by 0.33 and then having to add that, I believe I've showed this to you before, I can multiply it by 1.33 because that'll account for my original. And again, you shouldn't have to watch me do this math, but so I'm going to kind of rip through this. and this is the correct amount. I've checked it on a calculator after I did this work. But you should end up at 24. Well, you're not going to end up because you're going to have different values. But I ended up at 2,467 and 15 cents. And so then I would put that amount onto my little tracking sheet at 2,467 and 15 cents or 16 cents. I kind of made a mistake there. I think it's 15 cents, but regardless. Then obviously I'd have to do that for whatever other commodities or stocks I owned. Because remember, I had to have at least 5. And I know on the original thing I had 6, but I'm not doing all that. And then what I'd do is I'd add up all my current values and come up with some sort of total. Let's say it was 12,304 and 67. I'm just making that number up. Now it's this that I have to focus on for the next kind of part of the activity sheet, or the first part of the activity sheet, and I'm referring to activity sheet 2, which is this one called Look Ma, I'm Growing. And if you notice here, it asks what the principal was. Well, your principal's, put your name. Your principal's always going to be 10,000. That's your original investment. And my current point for portfolio value, which I just kind of made up, but was 12,367. And I'm going to use these two pieces of information to deal with percent of change. Because what am I doing? Well, I'm finding out my percent of change. I have a current value, but it's really from my principal. So how do we deal with that? Well, we've dealt with percent of change in class before. And so percent of change, I always want you to think about 2 words. And those words are difference over original. And I didn't bring this back, so I'm bringing it back right now. Difference would obviously refer to subtraction. And I'm going to subtract those 2 values. So I go, okay, so 12,367 minus my original principal of 10,000. Then original refers to, well, where did I start? Well, you always started at 10,000. That's the original amount. So I go 10,000. Then when I mathematically work this out, that's 2,304 and 67, 10,000. I don't want you to be pulling out the calculator here, so I'm totally okay with you estimating. I'm going to call that 2,300 over 10,000. Then we get some nice canceling, boom, boom. And then look, that's 23 of 100. Well, you know what that is. That's 23%. Yeah. And then on my little sheet, I would put percent of change of current value from principal. And I put, this is my original. Sorry, I forgot that part. And I put 23%. All right, let's move on to C. Now, C is asking about growth. I want to know what was the highest growth and what was the lowest growth. And so this is what we're talking about, growth. And so I'm going to look at the percentages for my high and my low. Now, let's just imagine, let's go back to a stock sheet here. Let's just imagine that I luckily chose Chipotle at CMG as the ticker, and look at its growth. It is 102% growth. Boom. Let's say I'm very impressed by that, but let's say I also chose this solar company, FSLR. And look at that, that's 7% growth. So you're going to look at whatever you had, and based upon the column, you're going to choose which one had the highest growth. This clearly was my 102%. My lowest was 7%. But again, only of the ones I chose. Don't just pick the lowest. You got to do the ones that you chose. And then what do I do? So I'm just going to simply put in the ticker, CMG, and I'll put in 102%. So again, you're not really doing math there. And then the low was the FSLR, and it was at 7%. Then the last thing I need you to do before our noon update is the most valuable stock. Now, value has to do with, well, what's it worth? Like we understand value. So if you think about what is my most valuable, well, if we just look at the little chart that I did, obviously Apple would be more value. Because look, 2467 is greater than 1600. So all we're looking at is in your little chart on your tracking sheet, like which column in the current value or which one in the current value is worth the most money. Not your initial investment, not how much it increased, nothing like that. Just like what is the most valuable commodity. And what you're merely naming here is you're going to name its percent of growth. And so we know it's Apple. Apple is my currently most valuable. That might change later. And I know that it grew 33%. And that's it. That's all you got to do in under 10 minutes. I'm happy. I hope you're well. I'm going to go back to the front because it's easier when I see it that way. Take care. Bye.